What is up with Darius Leonard? That and more this week on the IDP Blitz. Matt Schauf here to help us clear this up. Darius Leonard, one of those big ticket items in IDP drafts. Is he living up to his price?
Happy Wednesday, Sig, or as I like to call it, the day where I decide whether to trim my face or just wear the grind right on my chin.
Wear it. Hats are good too.
That's right. Darius Leonard is definitely not living up to the grind. He's not killing you, though, so it's an acceptable level right now. I actually wrote about Darius Leonard last week in my IDP Hits article on DraftSharks.com, free read, last Wednesday. He's been managing an ankle injury since August, and I was writing last week about how you could kind of trace his practice participation and his tackle shares rising as he started practicing a little bit more. Then, of course, Sunday morning, Zach Kiefer drops an article on The Athletic where Darius Leonard calls the ankle injury that he's managing, quote, one of the worst things I've been through in my life playing ball. I haven't even felt comfortable coming into a game. I haven't felt confident I can be myself. His practice participation was better last week, but then he had just 9% tackle share, slightly less than 9% tackle share last week against the Texans, half the tackle total of Bobby Okereke.
Mm-hmm.
I was just practicing the pronunciation this morning. I want to give it the way he wants.
It's the thought that counts.
That's right. Okereke. That's it. Okereke. I will be watching Darius Leonard's participation going forward for signs of improvement, but it might just be something that we're dealing with all year. We might not get quite the level of big plays that we usually get. Again, he's not killing you, so I think we can deal with it as it's going. We'll see if it gets better.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where for the Colts, an 80% or 75% Leonard, it's still better than anyone else they can trot out there. So it's not like they're going to shut him down as long as he can keep gritting his teeth and playing through this. Now, if they fall out of the playoff hunt, that's a different story because they also might shut down Carson Wentz. That's going to be really interesting, right? If Carson, he's at 98.8% of the snaps right now, I think, Matt. So first rounder on the line, another player, a first rounder, and an IDP centerpiece, Devin White, the horse lover. We might be getting a little hoarse yelling at the box scores that he's putting up this year.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to note with Devin White is that he's overrated as a player. When he was coming in as a prospect,
spicy.
Well, when he was coming in as a prospect, I remember thinking he's fast, but he's not overly impressive. And then everybody's like, "Oh God, he's a surefire top 5 pick. He went early. Everybody loved him last year. He's fine. He's okay as a linebacker, but he's kind of." We've always called linebackers the running backs of IDP, and he's a good example where you're on the field, you're fast, you got opportunity, you're going to make plays. It doesn't really matter how good you are in real life. People are going to think you're awesome. Now, for his production this year, it's way down from where it was last year, and there are a few things at play here, and it doesn't really matter just how good he is. One, the Bucs are averaging about 6 fewer team tackles per game versus last year. Probably a big part of that is they're facing fewer rushing attempts than last year. They've faced the fewest in the league in both seasons, but this year it's clear that opponents are like, forget it. We're not even going to try to run it at Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh. Mm-hmm. We're only going to do that once in a while. They're down to 16.3 rush attempts per game faced versus 22.4 last year. That's very similar to the number of tackles that they've shaved off of last year's number. Devin White's share, both solo and total tackles, are down slightly versus last year. He was right around 15% in both solo and total tackle share last season. He's at 13.3% in both categories this year. So not a huge difference, but, a little bit. The biggest factor in his fantasy scoring is that the sacks have not arrived at all. They probably will, is the good news. The opportunities have remained there for Devin White. He rushed the passer on 14% of his snaps so far, according to Pro Football Focus. That's actually up from 10.8% last year, 10.9% the year before. His quarterback hits are also up slightly on a per-game basis versus last year's pace. So there probably will be some sacks coming. Through 6 games last year, he only had 1 sack, and then he had the barrage, including the 2 3-sack games. So we might still get some of those games from Devin White to really turn around his scoring this season.
And there's a stretch coming up. This weekend against Chicago could be good. And then the Saints on a bye, then Washington, the Giants, the aforementioned Carson Wentz, Atlanta. So those are some games where he could get going, where they might be playing from ahead. That's whenever he can come in and land those knockout shots. Let's actually, who's been outperforming Darius Leonard? Who's been outperforming Devin White? One of my favorites. Already talked about him once so far this year on the IDP Blitz. David Long. And remember, this is a team that invested a lot in Jon Brown, invested a lot in Rashaan Evans, and ends up, at least production-wise, David Long's the guy. What can we look forward to from Long in the middle of the Titans defense?
Yeah, I put out a question on Twitter, seeing who people wanted to know about, and got a couple of responses about David Long. So I think the big question is, do we trust him after weeks of 12 and 14 tackles the past 2 times out? And I think there's 2 parts to this answer. First, should you trust David Long in your IDP lineup this week against the Chiefs? Yes. He's playing every snap right now. The Chiefs are an upside tackle matchup. So David Long's a good starter for week 7. Longer term, I think it's a little bit more iffy. He actually hasn't played all that well by the PFF metrics so far. He's missed 20% of his tackle attempts, according to Pro Football Focus. That's right in line with what he did last year and higher than you want a linebacker to be. He's also allowed passer ratings of 112 and 107 in coverage the past 2 years. So he's not adding a whole lot in either run defense or coverage so far. Jon Brown, when he's healthy, is probably still the best linebacker that the Titans have. We're going to have to see when he's healthy again. He's currently on IR for the knee sprain. Before that, it was a hamstring issue. Kind of some gray area in there for how healthy he was before he sprained the knee and what his playing time is going to look like versus David Long when he gets back. This weekend will mark the 3rd game since Jon Brown hit IR, so he's eligible to return next week. We'll see if the Titans are bringing him back at that point, and then we'll see who loses playing time. I mean, obviously, David Long has been the fill-in for Jon Brown, but Rashaan Evans seems like the weakest link in that group. So with his 5th-year option already gone and him out of the future plans for the Titans, it would seem to make some sense. I don't know, I don't know the ins and outs of each linebacker spot, whether David Long or Jon Brown could play Rashaan Evans' role, but I think it's at least a possibility that maybe they try to keep those 2 guys on the field going forward and take Evans off the field more.
Yeah, it's an interesting correlation you point out about sometimes players not playing well can still post those IDP numbers. And yeah, it's the Titans. Teams are going to continue to run at the Titans, or otherwise there's going to be a lot of, I think, what Dr. Jon Brown would call tackle-rich environment for David Long. Let's go around the horn with some rookie linebackers because it was quite a class, and we should check in on them. Starting out with Jamin Davis, who's the first drafted of this group. And my lasting memory of him was engulfing Devin Singletary. It felt like he stole Devin Singletary's soul on a 4th and short reception. What has he been doing since then? What has he been doing for IDP teams?
Yeah, it was a notable week for these rookie linebackers with a lot of different situations to go through. So Jamin Davis, 11 tackles against the Chiefs. He only played 56% of the snaps in that game, though. It did match his season high from week 1, but it's still not really a level we can trust, especially when it's just at that level, despite Jon Bostic being on IR. So Bostic should probably be back from IR pretty soon for his groin injury. I think we were all hoping that Jamin Davis would play more than he has with Bostic out. So the fact that he hasn't makes me worry that Bostic is going to take playing time away from him again, or that at least they'll stay at the same level where they have been the past few weeks. I think overall, it makes Cole Holcomb really the only Washington linebacker we can trust for sure in our IDP lineups.
You are listening to the IDP Blitz, watching the IDP Blitz here with Matt Schauf, SCHAUFDS. DS is for Draft Sharks. Always some of the best IDP work, and otherwise, always check out what he's doing, what we're doing at Football Guys. We appreciate everyone showing up in the chat room. For those of you enjoying this YouTube content, like the video, comment on the video, subscribe. We love seeing the subscribers grow. You want to help out the show. That is one of the best ways to do it. You want to help out your fantasy team, your IDP team, Matt. What about Derrick Barnes? All those signs leading up to the season, they want him to be their middle linebacker. Not a lot of competition. Jamie Collins is off the roster now. And certainly, speaking of tackle-rich environments, there'll be a lot of defense. Not a lot of good defense, but a lot of defense for the Lions going forward.
Go ahead and stash Derrick Barnes in Dynasty. He did have 9 tackles against the Bengals last week, but his playing time was just 44% in that game, nearly identical to week 5, and behind both Alex Anzalone and Jalen Reeves-Maybin. Reeves-Maybin did see his playing time drop last week versus the previous 2 games. He was down in the 40s as well after being in the 60s the previous 2 games. So, we'll see. Maybe Reeves-Maybin keeps going down and Barnes picks it up. but I don't think he's particularly close to being trustworthy in our lineups just yet. It looks like it's just going to be boring old Anzalone for weekly playing time certainty going forward.
I have some certainty about this next one, Matt. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is going to be a really, really good NFL player. And the Browns got lucky whenever he fell to them because he looks like an impact player. And just a larger football strategy talk, you need players. You mentioned that linebacker running back parallel, Matt. You need players at that second level off-ball linebacker with the crazy athleticism and energy that he brings to match some of the players that bring that athleticism and energy on the offensive side of the ball. But what about how it translates to stats? And also he's on IR right now, but how will it translate? Because what we see in IDP leagues is good NFL player doesn't always equal good IDP player. What about with JOK?
It seemed like it was on its way to translating for us because for the second straight game, they had him leading linebackers in playing time, despite Anthony Walker being available. But then Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah suffered that high ankle sprain late in the game. So, I mean, now he's going to be out for a while and we're going to have to wait and see again. I think once he's back on the field long term, he's nothing but exciting. He's the kind of guy with the kind of speed that, like we said before, even if he's not playing awesome, he has the makeup speed to get there, to make tackles, to affect the passing game. I think the fact that he's already grabbed the playing time share that he has indicates that they have big plans for him and they believe that he is the best prospect that they have in that linebacking core. We have to remember JOK spent a lot of summer on the sideline. I mean, he missed a lot of August and has still already climbed to the top of this linebacking core in playing time. So once he's back, I remain excited. I remain excited long-term. This might be a good time to try to get him onto dynasty rosters. I think for now, though, you have to drop him in most redraft situations because you can't hold an uncertain linebacker through an uncertain stay on IR. Anthony Walker back to being a solid, unexciting, but, tackle collecting option for our lineups in the meantime.
What about the Chiefs linebackers? We have Willie Gay, who started the year on IR. This was supposed to be his big arrival year, but that created an opening for this year's second day linebacker pick, Nick Bolton, to have an opening. Will either of them walk through that door?
Well, and then Sunday morning, I believe it was Jeremy Fowler, I think from ESPN, said that one of the plans the Chiefs had for improving the defense was playing Nick Bolton and Willie Gay together more in the game. I guess he forgot to share that with Kansas City because that didn't end up being the case. Nick Bolton had a team-high 9 tackles in that game against Washington. He finished second among Chiefs linebackers in playing time for that one. Anthony Hitchens left the game with an elbow injury, hyperextended elbow. He had an MRI Monday. I'm still waiting to find out what the results are from that. I don't know if anybody could imagine a Chiefs offensive player getting a Monday MRI and us not knowing the results by midday Wednesday, but that's where we're at with searching for IDP news. It's like doing an Easter egg hunt a week later. Ben Neiman ended up leading Chiefs linebackers in playing time against Washington. So even with Hitchens out of the way, it was not Willie Gay stepping up or Nick Bolton dominating things. It was Ben Neiman who just likes to show up every time some Chiefs linebacker gets hurt. Willie Gay actually dropped from 44% playing time in week 5 to 31% last week. So we'll see where that goes. I think right now, Nick Bolton, I think, looks fine. I think the fact that Kansas City protected 2 linebackers on practice squad this week doesn't bode well for what they expect for Anthony Hitchens' elbow. That said, no Anthony Hitchens bodes well for us because we would much rather get Nick Bolton and Willie Gay on the field than Anthony Hitchens.
What we need, Matt, it's funny, IDP analysis, IDP analysts, like the guru who will be back next week, and Matt Schauf, it can be like Bitcoin 10 years ago if we just get IDP in DFS. It's all alphabet soup, right? But if we get it in DFS, then all this stuff that y'all have been chopping wood on for years and years and years will become very, very important. And IDP news will not be hard to find. And you'll be ahead of the curve if you're listening to this right now, as you should be. It makes you a better fantasy football player in every way and enjoy football more. Last one, are we going to enjoy fantasy football, IDP fantasy football more? With Pete Werner, or just in general, the Saints linebackers coming back off of their bye, what do we need to know?
So the question here is what it means for Quan Alexander to be coming off IR. They designated him to return on Tuesday. He's got the elbow injury that put him there. we'll see what they expect from him. But with Quan Alexander out, Pete Werner has been playing well. And, by multiple team beat reporters saying that he has been playing well by PFF grades, by watching him in the game, whatever you want to choose to measure it, he's doing well. And they drafted him in the second round this year in that fairly loaded linebacker class that we talked about. So clearly the Saints started out from a position of liking him. Quan Alexander does not have a big contract, $1.1 million. He's coming off the December Achilles tendon tear. So I think he was already iffy heading into the year. I don't see any reason why the Saints would sit Pete Werner back down to get Quan Alexander back on the field. So I think that I would expect from now for them to go ahead and keep Pete Werner on the field until he gives them a reason not to. And I'm going to go ahead and treat him that way for IDP usage. I think there's high upside this week against Seattle because, Geno Smith at his best is erratic. So there's big play upside of that one. There should be more rushing volume than usual for playing against the Seahawks. I say go ahead and keep Pete Werner around for now. We'll see first when Quan Alexander is actually on the active roster again because he's just designated to return for now. And then after that, we'll see what the team does playing time-wise between them.
We'll continue to see what the NFL does, how our IDP teams do, and otherwise continue to be captivated by everything that goes on. And we have people like Matt Schauf, again, at Draft Sharks, SCHAUF, and the guru, John Norton, and all the great IDP writers at Football Guys to help guide you through these choppy waters. But we can get you home safe in the storm, the bye storm of Week 7. As always, we like doing this for you folks because you are so classy.